If you've been around my channel for a while, chances are you've probably seen these videos. And chances are these videos are probably the reason how you found my channel. I've been on the internet discussing topics such as gender and sexuality, and because I've exposed my own experiences out to the public, their opinions have massively shaped my own feelings. I feel like my own thoughts regarding these topics never really felt like a big deal throughout most of my life, but it was still a part of my life that I do still think is worth sharing, because I know lots of people will relate to this, in different levels of similarity, of course. But due to being on the internet and talking about my own feelings freely, everyone else has the right to give me their opinions, and a lot of the things people have said to me have been horrible. Now that I've given so much information about myself to the public, especially about this kind of topic, I think it's best for me to address something else that's very important. I have mentioned this before, but I never explicitly talked about it. This time, I want people to know where I'm coming from based on everything I've said in the past. Now, allow me to briefly summarize all the things I've said in terms of how I felt about myself and the way I expressed that on the internet. First things first, I want to make it clear that I am male. I was born male, grew up as male, and was socialized as male. For most of my life, I learned that being male was who I am, and there wasn't anything other than that. And I was totally fine with it. I didn't even question it once in my prepubescent life. When I was young, I did develop masculine traits such as loving video games and having male friends, but as I got older, I began developing a preference for feminine things, such as preferring girl toys and having female friends. Over time, I did start shifting from those kinds of interests more, and I still feel that way now. However, the first person to have ever disapproved of that was my parents. Although they were just simply stating what they felt, it left a stain that I couldn't remove, and that pretty much became a reinforcement. But I couldn't stop loving the things I do because I can't just forcibly hate what I love. It's not right to do that. And so I decided to keep that up. And eventually, I made it even more prominent as soon as I started doing YouTube. As my channel started gaining popularity, more questions snuck in. I drew myself very feminine to the point where people were confused what gender I was because so many people mistook me for a girl. At first, I just simply corrected them and moved on, but those questions kept coming in. Eventually, I decided I had enough, and I made a video to address that. I made a video called Gender Stereotypes to basically confirm that I'm male, but I love a lot of feminine things. That video ended up getting so much attention that even a bunch of trans people started hearing about it. Although, it wasn't all good. You see, a lot of people, especially trans people, began making assumptions about my identity, assuming that I was trans and I just didn't know it yet. I wasn't bothered by it at first, but then so many people began saying the same thing. It got to a point where I started to doubt my own feelings and question whether they were right. I wasn't ready to give a conclusion yet, but I wanted to discuss this situation too. A few months after that video came out, I made Coming Out to basically address what happened. I didn't come out as trans, and I'm still the same person that I am now. So, have my feelings changed since then? To put it in better words, I'm not introducing anything new. I'm emphasizing something that I should have emphasized more than what I did in the past. One important thing that I feel like a lot of people didn't pay much attention to, likely because I didn't actually mention it much, was the fact that I didn't conclude to an actual explicit label. I never actually clearly stated what I identified as, and that's because I didn't have certainty at the time, and I still kinda don't. Although the uncertainty seemed to target labels and the way they were used, especially on the internet. This is going to be the main focus for this video. I've now realized the thing I struggled the most about myself was not about my identity, but about figuring out what label truly fit my experience. It's not as easy as you may think because we're very quick to jump to conclusions based on the things someone says, and a lot of the things people say can be very wrong. So let me discuss the importance of labels. What are they, and why are they so important? Labels, in general, are typically used to help us categorize and define things in an organized manner, in a way that we can properly describe what something is and where they fit. We do this for everything, and this is especially done when describing gender and sexuality experiences. Everyone has their own experience and preferences when it comes to their identity and what they think describes them. And yet, people have created labels to describe these diverse experiences. Labels such as gay, straight, bi, pan, cis, trans, non-binary are the most common labels people have used, although there's many more than that. The reason why people use these labels and what makes them important are for a few reasons. For some people, they love using labels because it gives them a sense of belonging or comfort. They feel that the term accurately describes their experiences, or the most important reason, they use it to quickly communicate their identity to others because it's a lot simpler. It does seem very convenient, right? But it does lead to a lot of bad things as well. The issue with labels, which is how I feel about them, is that they're way too restrictive and it can cause people to make assumptions and stereotypes about someone's identity, and that can be hurtful. For example, if I said I was gay, people are going to fill in the blanks for who they think I am as a person just based on that little information that was given. Once people know I'm gay, now they'll likely have a very strict, specific viewpoint of what that means, because if I'm gay, I'm probably all of these things too, because many other gay people are openly like that. That's the issue I have with labels. Lots of people use them because they like having that certainty, but for me, it feels like a commitment I have to live up to. And also, I don't feel certain enough that my identity is one thing. And I know that I can use more than one label. Having a few or more is just way too confusing. You see, this was the thing I was actually struggling with. Looking back at how I felt about myself, the confusion was never about my identity and who I was as a person. I was struggling with trying to find the right label to use because everyone always talks about this. Everyone always seemed to have certainty in their labels and how everyone feels comfortable using them in conversation. Me, it was the opposite. I hated trying to address my entire identity in only one or a few words because it felt like I was simplifying myself. Once I found out I can actually just not use any ever, is what felt like true validation. I realized my feelings were right and my decisions about not labeling myself are totally reasonable. It took me years to understand that I can just say no and leave it that way. And so I'm deciding to leave it that way. I'm never going to label myself anymore. But I know what you're thinking. If you watched my previous videos, you're probably wondering, if you're saying you're never labeling yourself, didn't you technically label yourself in this video and this one? That's right, I did. Don't think I forgot that too. In the gender stereotypes video, I said I was cisgender, but I only said that because I wanted to prove to people that I'm not trans. I'm not saying I'm cis, but I'm not saying I'm trans either. Again, labels, especially gender identity labels, are trying to box me in, and I don't want that. You see, gender identity has been a lot more difficult for me to define than sexuality because I personally think it's a lot more complicated. Sexuality was easier, and I actually did explicitly state my sexuality in this video, and I want to talk about it as well here. If you haven't watched that video, I came out as Arrow Ace. The feedback I received on that video has been mostly positive, and back then when that video came out, I felt relieved. I felt like I was letting go of a pressure that I've been holding back for a while. It did feel good at first to finally get that message out there, but honestly, now, I don't really feel the same anymore. You see, the label Arrow Ace was probably the label I felt comfortable using for the longest time out of any other label, and I thought that if I could finally address it in a video, I could make it official once and for all. But truth be told, even months after that video was out, I started to regret the things I've said. Now, I'm not saying that the experiences I've discussed in that video were fake, but using those examples and then giving a clear, definite conclusion started to feel wrong months after using it. When it came to gender identity, I didn't feel comfortable at all using labels, and you can tell that I didn't want to use them. So, why did I feel any different about sexuality? I actually didn't. I just had it easier when it came to discussing sexuality than gender. The point is, just like gender, putting on a label for my sexuality feels just as restricting in the same ways. And once I finally started to realize that using a label for that felt restrictive, I applied that to my sexuality too. So that means I no longer identify as Arrow Ace. Not because my experiences have changed, but my connection to that label lost its power. Think of it like this. Because I was able to learn more about what it means to be Arrow Ace in its own way, I was able to understand whether I fit into that definition. Or not. When I learned about it for the first time, I thought my experience resonated with it, and I felt happy using that label. But as time passed, the connection to that label felt less fitting. It started to feel like I was trying to compress my life into something so small, which isn't possible for me. I was able to learn that part of me, but it doesn't encompass all of me. I realized that about gender, and now I realize that about sexuality, and I don't want any other label to do the same for me in the future. I've had experience with having a label, and now I'm certain I don't want any. I've had that feeling for a while, but now I can understand why I felt that way. An important thing I've learned about labels is that they are only meant to be used by the individual themselves, whether they feel comfortable using them. And what I've learned about myself when it comes to labels is that I can just disregard them and live my own life comfortably. Knowing that I can still be the same person that I am without having to conform to a strict definition is what truly felt fulfilling for me. I wish more people were more open about this, because it seems that most people, when they discuss their gender and sexuality, they're always comfortable starting with the labels, and I felt the opposite. I used to think I was confused. No, I just felt like my experience has more nuance, something a label will never have. And most importantly, there is a big difference between saying I am versus I identify as. The I am part addresses what your experience actually is. The I identify as part addresses how you want to describe that in words to other people. You don't need a label for your experience to be valid. Everyone's experience is valid, and labels are only meant to be used to just describe that. They're not mandatory because most straight people don't actively identify as straight, much like how most cisgender people don't actively identify as cisgender. Does that mean they're no longer straight or cis? No. I don't have to say that I'm left-handed to become left-handed. I just am. I'm not saying I'm male because I identify as male. I just am. That's a fact, not a label. I used to think that if I could finally have a label for myself, it would mean I'm finally real because I have a clear-cut answer to my identity. And when I tried using a label for the first time, I now realize how much they don't make me feel any better. I felt confined to one little box, and I didn't have the ability to move anymore once I was locked in. That's how I felt when I made that video where I came out as Arrow Ace. I thought I couldn't change my mind anymore when I really wanted to. Everyone saw me as Arrow Ace, and now they'll only see me as that forever. Part of me was genuinely thinking of deleting those videos, but I won't. And that's because I want people to understand how much I've changed since then, and how much my perspective has grown and developed. Saying I was Arrow Ace in the past is always going to be a part of me, but it doesn't have to define me forever. I can't guarantee that remaining without labels is something I'll stick to forever, because that would be going against what I just said, but it's a decision I'm willing to commit to, longer than any other label has ever done. Props to anyone else who feels so comfortable sticking to labels, but for me, I've never felt more free without them, and I plan on keeping it that way.